Alright guys, Dominic here for Kit Guru, and today we're looking at a new liquid cooler from Corsair. It is the H100X. Now interestingly, the fact that it's called H100X actually tells us a bit about the product already, because if you know anything about Corsair liquid coolers, all of the most recent ones, for instance the H100i V2, the H80i V2, and then even more recently we had the H115i Pro and the H150i Pro, they all have the I in their name, not the X, and the I essentially refers to the fact that you can use those coolers with Corsair Link to control things like the RGB lighting. You can look at the liquid temperature of the coolant inside the liquid coolers themselves, and you can also change fan speeds. The H100X, however, does not support Corsair Link. It's in that sense a dumb liquid cooler, because all you really need to do, make sure the pump is getting power, plug in the two fans, and off you go. So it's essentially a very basic, very simple liquid cooler from Corsair, priced at $79.99. So first things first, what do you get in the box? You get the user manual and some warranty information. There's also the necessary screws and hardware. You get one bracket for Intel, and then there's also a separate bracket for AMD. All of the screws do come in one bag, they're not labelled or anything like that, so you are likely going to have to use the manual to figure out what goes where. Now the two fans are actually from Corsair's SP series, which is interesting considering the more recent H115i Pro and the H150i Pro, their fans were from the ML series. So you obviously get two 120mm fans, as it's a 240mm liquid cooler, and as I mentioned from Corsair's SP series, they use 4-pin PWM cables, but you do get a Y splitter also included in the box. Now the cooler itself is actually very conventional. It's obviously a 240mm radiator, as I mentioned, which measures 27mm thick. The tubing, which is braided but nice and flexible, measures approximately 14 inches, and the pump actually retains the same kind of styling as we saw on the more recent liquid coolers, which I mentioned before. However, despite the similar appearance, this liquid cooler is actually manufactured in partnership with Coolit rather than Acertech, and if you know Corsair liquid coolers, you know all of the more recent ones have been manufactured by Acertech. We don't actually know why that is the case. However, if we were to make a guess, it is likely that because this is actually Corsair's cheapest 240mm liquid cooler on the market right now, we'd say by going with Coolit, they've probably managed to just reduce costs so they can bring this cooler out at a lower price. So as we mentioned, similar looking pump to the previous models, and there's also a 3-pin connector to give power to the pump, and there's also a SATA connector which provides power for the backlit pump. It's not RGB though, it's only white. So moving on to installation, we're going to start with Intel. For those using Intel sockets other than LGA 2011 or LGA 2066, you will need to use the supplied backplate, and the first thing to do is position this behind your motherboard. You can then flip the motherboard over and you need to thread in 4 standoffs to that backplate. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and place the pump on top of the CPU, and then the mounting bracket should just fit through those standoffs, and then the pump is secured with 4 thumb screws. That's really it for Intel sockets, and for AMD users, you will need to use the original backplate and mounting bracket that came with your motherboard. The first thing to do when installing the liquid cooler to an AMD platform is to first remove the pre-installed Intel bracket that is on the H100X's pump, and then you can clip on the AMD bracket instead. 2 screws can then be threaded onto that little bracket, as we mentioned, just above the clips, and then you can go ahead and mount the pump on top of the CPU. To secure the pump in place, you just need to latch those little clips onto the mounting bracket that is on your motherboard, and then you can secure it down just by tightening those 2 screws, and installation is complete. So overall, installation is very easy for both sockets. Despite the fact that the H100X is manufactured by Coolit, not Acertech, Corsair has managed to retain the exact same installation process as we've seen on all of its previous liquid coolers, so it's very easy, very beginner friendly, and overall absolutely nothing to complain about. With the cooler installed and power supplied as well, we can also take a quick look at the lighting. As I mentioned, it's only a static white light, so it's not hugely exciting, but it does provide a bit more interest than a plain pump. Now then, moving on to performance. It is worth saying that we've recently updated our testing methodology for our coolers, and that just means there aren't as many comparison coolers on the charts as there were previously. However, if you are interested in our methodology, the full run through is over on kitguru.net, but in a nutshell we use an i7 4790K, both stock and overclocked, and the figures we present are delta T values, meaning we subtract the ambient room temperature from the actual temperature of the CPU. So while the comparison list isn't huge, what you can see is the fact that the H100X is actually very competitive. It's right up there at the top with the Arctic Liquid Freezer 240, and it actually betters both of Corsair's most recent releases, the H115i Pro and the H150i Pro. So in terms of raw performance at least, it is very impressive. The cost, however, is noise levels, and I did think to myself when I saw the fact that the fans were SB series rather than ML series, I thought it was quite likely these are going to be a bit louder. Corsair's previous liquid coolers from a few years ago definitely had a reputation for being a bit raucous. So as you can see, it is the loudest cooler on test by a fair way. It is worth pointing out that a few of those coolers are optimized for silent operation, which makes the difference look a bit more drastic. However, there is absolutely no doubt that the H100X is definitely more performance oriented rather than being geared for silent operation. On the whole though, the H100X definitely goes down as a success. It's actually Corsair's cheapest 240mm liquid cooler on the market right now, something which will probably make it instantly successful, and it's also easy to install, it has understated visuals, and it's a top performer. The only downside, as I mentioned, is the noise levels. However, if you've been looking to upgrade to liquid cooling for a while now, the H100X provides a cost-effective and still impressive way of getting into the liquid cooling game. So, I'm Dominic for Kit Guru. This has been our review of the Corsair 100X. If you like this video, you can give us a thumbs up, leave a comment below and subscribe. Make sure you also hit the bell icon so you can be notified of all of our future videos. Lastly, we'd love to chat with you over on Facebook and Twitter as well. But until then, I will see you in the next video.